going back to this sort of the old world versus the new world of clinical trials versus using real world data. When you have this, how do you overcome that level of skepticism that may still exist? I mean, I'm sure you deal with it when you are publishing or trying to make changes to treatment strategies with data that doesn't necessarily come from a clinical trial. What's the strategy to overcoming that skepticism?
So, it's very interesting. When I started, there was a lot of skepticism that these data would be worthwhile, but we've been very lucky. Researchers have asked very good questions. So
Hmm.
I'm mindful of a nice publication from Chris Booth in Kingston, who does a lot of health research outcomes work. And so he looked at, how long after surgery could you delay starting preventive treatment or adjuvant chemotherapy and still get a good outcome? So that was actually really practical. And that was an everyday issue that was just not addressed by the current clinical trial literature. So I think this is where we have to go, right? When there's a practical issue that's not addressed by current evidence, that's where real world data and researchers need to go. So, for example, recently we've learned that if you give immunotherapy to people with cancer and then you switch to targeted therapy, maybe you didn't get the results in time, maybe there weren't opportunities before, whatever reason, patients are at higher risk of immune side effects for the first 3 months of treatment. We didn't see
Hmm.
that in the trials. We actually saw that from a real world publication. So they presented their data. This was a very nice French study looking at patients with KRAS mutant lung cancer. They showed that in the first 3 months, patients had higher rates of immune mediated toxicity. Then they went back and they looked for it in the trial and they found it. And now it's a thing. It's a big safety signal. We use it routinely, and it was discovered through real world evidence, and now everybody's finding it in all of their series with all of the drugs. But we never looked at it before. And even, on data safety monitoring committees that I sit on, we all ask the question, well, do they have immune therapy and what's going on with these patients versus other patients? Because now we know from real world evidence that there are differences that were not reported in trials. So that's what I would say to skeptics, that there's so many questions that are unanswered, and look at the things we've been able to do with real world evidence. I think that there's much less skepticism today. I think people have embraced it. People are interested. For example, one of the societies that I work very closely with, they have a great journal, the Journal of Thoracic Oncology. They used to publish a lot of outcomes data, then they kind of got a bit too expensive. Now they publish mostly interventional trials, but they recognized that these are important studies. So they actually created a whole new journal, GTO Clinical Research Reports, and it's really for real world data for us to be able to pool and share some of these unique insights that you're just not going to get from clinical trials and that are so relevant to patients and healthcare providers in everyday practice.